The very success of their small businesses and so on leads, and the fact that the kids are attending schools leads the second generation to very quickly move in terms of learning the language they know that without knowing the language of the country, they are not going to go very far. So the enclaves that are successful tend to self-defeat, self-destroy. That is, they operate one or two generations, and then if there is no more immigration, even if there is more immigration and other immigrants keep coming on these businesses, their children and their grandchildren can become properly assimilated. Immigration should not be looked exclusively in economic terms as paying your pensions, but it should be looked also in social and cultural terms. That is, immigration adds an element of vigor, of novelty, of new cuisines, new ways of thinking, new celebrations that often are in the mix create a much more interesting society than one that was ethnically homogeneous and aging. And of course, immigrants, because of their youth, they can bring much more. That is a number of cultural innovations to this. So, that is, the value of diversity is not exclusively the fact that they may have an economic role, but if given enough time, these things add up to the national mix, and they can be enriched by that combination. No?
I totally agree. As Professor Portes says, having ethnic enclave economy is probably it's one of the most essential things to start with. Mm-hmm. But over the generation, over the time, over the span of the time, this should change in terms of if you just look at it from the pure economic point of view, pure business networking point of view. When you have people who are more or less like each other, when you have people who share the same background, and people in business, they kind of choose each other based on something which is called identificational based trust. I trust you because you're having the same background, and you trust me because I have the same background. We have the common language, religion, place of birth, etc. And that is good. But the disadvantage of that is what you know is the same thing as I know. And what you need in business is new information. Mm-hmm. When you are so close as you are, and the information circulates in a kind of high velocity in this closed network, the tricky dilemma is that the internal trust becomes a kind of external distrust, mm-hmm. and to put a kind of barrier for new information and innovations. Normally, innovation comes from new information. So, in order to kind of achieve growth and dynamic in your firm when you are an entrepreneur, it is a good idea to know when you should convert, when there is a concept of coupling and decoupling, mm-hmm. when you should get close and when you should get rid of your let's the wall falls, and then you can be inspired by the outside. But there is no doubt about, to start with, if you don't have the tight community and a mono-ethnic network, then you should be more than a normal average ethnic entrepreneur to kind of survive economically.
So the basic skills will come in time.
The most success, in the all ethnic enclaves have both a combination of what Professor Rizal have mentioned, it's a combination of people who are completely within it. They are completely, and those who by virtue of greater human capital or more success start moving out. That is, actually a successful ethnic enclave cannot be entirely self-contained. It has to have markets outside of it for what it produces, from restaurant meals to an enjoyment to actual products like cigars, textiles, and so on. So they are not in, and those who become, that is, those entrepreneurs that start entering into contact with the outside to sell and so on, that usually they are more successful and they bring it out. That also facilitates the process of incorporation, provided that there are two aspects, I think, that are important for ethnic enclaves to be successful. First, in addition to the solidarity of the group and the human capital, one, that the external, the receiving society be somewhat open. That is, that it would not heavily discriminate or marginalize this group, because then, if that is the case, it's difficult for it to develop, and it also tends to reinforce the inwardness of the group. So to the extent that the general society heavily discriminates or separates, then you don't have this beneficial process of moving ahead. And also that the culture of the receiving group, the ethnic group, is essentially oriented, is instrumentally oriented toward economic success, survival, and so on, and not driven by some kind of culture, religious conviction. Let's say that we have to remain apart from then that may create a problem, at least in the short run. I think that usually the children go beyond that, but that slows down the process of incorporation.
Yeah. You mentioned something about diversity. Then there is also the concept of super diversity that has been brought up by Steven Bertowick, and this is the super diverse society is much more than the diverse society. Now everything is getting more and more complicated, even without the diverse societies. It's getting more diverse, and that is what he more or less calls super diversity. Having that in mind kind of leads to that it broadens our understanding of diversity. That's one thing. The other thing is that it allows to kind of see the differences as a kind of potential, and the differences makes the societies much more stronger, especially in the era of globalization, because otherwise you will lose competitiveness.